Welcome everybody to the Urantia book. As I was saying in the previous videos, this book not only has these very deep insights into things like God the ultimate, God the absolute, it also has these searing commentaries about the mundane level of life, not the spiritual. This is a paper called The Development of the State. Now keep in mind, these papers are written by advanced celestial beings. So, this is written by a Melchizedek, an ancient classification of beings that are just wise beyond belief. So you'd have to expect very deep and searing words from a being who has not only witnessed the evolution on this planet, but also on thousands, maybe even millions of other planets, and has understood how things take place. Okay, let's see though. That's a tall order. If you find this to be searing, make sure you like and subscribe. Look at this. Development of the state. The words of a Melchizedek, an ancient advanced being. Let's see what they say. The state is a useful evolution of civilization. It represents society's net gain from the ravages and sufferings of war. Even statecraft is merely the accumulated technique for adjusting the competitive contest of force between the struggling tribes and nations. The modern state is the institution which survived in the long struggle for group power. Superior power eventually prevailed, and it produced a creature of fact, the state, together with the moral myth of the absolute obligation of the citizen to live and die for the state. But the state is not of divine genesis. It was not even produced by volitionally intelligent human action. It is purely an evolutionary institution and was wholly automatic in origin. So they're saying your understanding is not something sent by God or anything like that. This is purely, it's not even the product of people thinking intelligently and saying this is what the state should be. It's evolutionary. It's going back from the times of the caveman organizing into tribes and having that be their state. And it says here, together with the moral myth of absolute obligation. It's a myth. It's a moral myth, okay? Now, here's a great one-liner for you. Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind. Because if you have nationalism, then you're going to have this obligation to live and die for your state. Patriotism is fine. That's like rah, rah, go team. That is a positive type of thing. Rooting for your thing, feeling a sense of belonging and love for your country. But then nationalism is we're the best. We can stomp out the other guy because purely because our nation is the best, and that's what Genesis. That's what turns into the wars. Okay, it's that nationalism. Check this out. The evolution of representative government. So they're talking about this evolution. Democracy, while an ideal, so they're saying, that is the ideal. You've come across it eventually because you've had all of your failed dictators and, all these different formations that haven't, they say, yeah, everybody should have a voice here. It's a product, okay, but it's, is a product of civilization, not evolution, okay? So the democracy is the ideal, okay? That's not the evolutionary. Go slowly, select carefully, for the dangers of democracy are 1. Glorification of mediocrity, right? If they're saying everybody has an equal say, well, then maybe even what they're saying, mediocrity, could be something like a violent criminal or, somebody who wants to have some sort of power of dictatorship or something like that, or the ideals of we appreciate the dictator, because a lot of people do vote for that. Okay, so you're glorifying mediocre. That's a mediocre understanding. Oh, right here, choice of base and ignorant rulers, okay, because they can be tricked. everybody can be swayed in one way or another. Well, not us, because we are accessing our spiritual ideals, which is beyond the level of this planet, was beyond the sophistries of being swayable. Failure to recognize the basic facts of social evolution. Okay, so if, for instance, a good example of that is for somebody to say, like, oh, well, the Constitution is God-given. The United States Constitution is God-given. No, it's a product of social evolution. It might contain an ideal in there, okay, but there's so much social evolution that happens in there. So yeah, amending it is a good idea, okay? Danger of universal suffrage in the hands of uneducated and indolent majorities, all right? So if that goes back to this glorification of mediocrity. So they're actually saying if these uneducated and indolent has just the same amount of say as somebody who has an idea of the whole understanding, then that could be dangerous. And in fact, they even say in a neighboring planet, one that's close to ours, as far as it even had a rebellion on it, like ours had, they compare and they say that they have developed a system where certain individuals get 2 votes opposed to 1, because they are aware of this fact that you can, if everybody got the same vote and you gave somebody who wants to, form a system where their group of 10 are the kings of the entire world and they will keep everybody as slaves, they shouldn't have the same vote, the same number of votes, or some example like that, whatever. Okay. Slavery to public opinion. The majority is not always right. See, this is this thing. That's okay. So even the majority is not always right, because maybe the majority are not very sharp and they don't have this. See, this book also points out that the ideal understanding of government and politics is the most amount of good for the greatest number of people for the longest length of time. And that is what we should be striving for. And if somebody doesn't understand that and they say, well, I want the most amount of good for the white people only, then that could be the majority opinion, and especially in the United States, where that is that's the majority, right? Is the white people, for instance. So if they are all thinking we should have the most amount of good for the white people only, then they're slave to public opinion. Their majority is wrong, you see? So that's why this universal suffrage idea is not the highest form of government. Public opinion, common opinion, has always delayed society, okay? But nevertheless, it is valuable for, while retarding social evolution, it does preserve civilization. So it's these systems are allowed to evolve by the divine. The divine has this over control, and they know that we're going to go through these phases, and they're not going to stop them, even though it makes things it retards the social evolution to go at a slower pace. It preserves some sort of civilization. Education of public opinion is the only safe and true method of accelerating civilization. See, force is only a temporary expedient, and cultural growth will increasingly accelerate as bullets give way to ballots. Public opinion, the mores, is the basic and elemental energy in social evolution and state development, but to be of state value, it must be non-violent in expression. So there's your ideals. That's why this book is something you can fully embrace yourself into. There's nothing in this book that says we need to do a violent overthrow, hatred is the way, violence is the way, and that sort of thing. That's that loving ideal, to treat others as you would treat yourself. The measure of the advance of society is directly determined by the degree to which public opinion can control personal behavior and state regulation through nonviolent expression. The really civilized government had arrived when public opinion was clothed with the powers of personal franchise. Popular elections may not always decide things rightly, but they represent the right way even to do a wrong thing. See, there you go, folks. Searing. Somebody who has observed a million planets evolve in government can write a statement like that. They represent the right way even to do a wrong thing. Evolution does not at once produce superlative perfection, but rather comparative and advancing practical adjustment. There are 10 steps or stages to the evolution of a practical and efficient form of representative government. Wow. So this is like direct information about how to change the world and society. Freedom of the person. Slavery, serfdom, and all forms of human bondage must disappear. So write that in there, folks. Is that something that you want to hang your hat on? I sure do. Freedom of the mind. Unless a free people are educated, taught to think intelligently, and plan wisely, freedom usually does more harm than good. Okay, so if you have that's what they said before. It's that education. That's the means to which you enlighten a society, not by force, not by control. You have to educate them, right? And I believe we're witnessing this in the world today. If everybody has this freedom and they're all toting guns and they're uneducated, then you're going to get these really tragic events worldwide, nation by nation. The reign of law. Liberty can be enjoyed only when the will and whims of human rulers are replaced by legislative enactments in accordance with accepted fundamental law. So taking away the whims of a human, even though he might have been democratically elected in by the mediocre, the whims can't be the thing that is deciding. Freedom of speech. Representative government is unthinkable without freedom of all forms of expression for human aspirations and opinions. Absolutist, okay? Free, so can you burn a flag? Sure can. That's a form of expression, right? That's just speech, burning flag. Maybe you're doing pollution if you burn 10 million of them or something like that, but for all intensive purposes. Security of property. No government can long endure if it fails to provide for the right to enjoy personal property in some form. So take your communism, throw it out the window. Man craves the right to use, control, bestow, sell, lease, and bequeath his personal property. Okay. The right of petition. Representative government assumes the right of citizens to be heard. The privilege of petition is inherent in free citizenship. The right to rule. It is not enough to be heard. The power of petition must progress the actual management. So you can't just petition the government, but you also have to be like, well, I can be elected then into my government. Okay. Management of the government. Universal suffrage. So here you go. Representative government presupposes an intelligent, efficient, and universal electorate. The character of such a government will ever be determined by the character and caliber of those who compose it. As civilization progresses, suffrage, while remaining universal for both sexes, will be effectively modified, regrouped, and otherwise differentiated. See, so they're saying that it's not just one person, one vote, because of those ideas of the mediocre throwing the society into chaos, So it's like a level of education or qualification that says, oh, they learned like they went through a whole course on civics and learned about statecraft, and they learned about the history of, dictators, fascists, whatever. So they're earning 2 votes rather than somebody being like, well, this will be good for the whites, so, give me my say. Control of public servant. No civil government will be serviceable and effective unless the citizenry possesses and use wise techniques of guiding and controlling office holders and public servants. I'm going to read that again. No civil government will be serviceable and effective unless the citizenry possesses and use wise techniques of guiding and controlling office holder. Okay, so they have to. In fact, in the other one, in the paper that I was talking about the other government on a neighboring planet, they say that if you betray public trust, as in if you're an elected official and you lie to line your own pockets, or you somehow, betray the public trust, that is a crime punishable, a capital punishment, the death penalty, because you're taking so many people's lives and affecting them for your own personal gain. It's just as bad as killing one person, or maybe even worse. So they're saying that is something that, and it should happen. We have our Nuremberg trials or whatever, but largely these people they're war criminals, and they go unpunished, unaccounted for, and that should not be the case. Intelligent and trained representation. The survival of democracy is dependent on successful representative government, and that is conditioned upon the practice of electing to public offices only those individuals who are technically trained, intellectually competent, socially loyal, and morally fit. Only by such provisions can government of the people, by the people, and for the people be preserved. Okay, so they're saying these people have to have an understanding of government. Oh, here's another good one-liner. There should be no politics in government. Nowadays, we have all politics. And they're saying the one-liner is that it should be government. It should be about how are we going to create the most good for the most amount of people for the longest amount of time. That's government. And then we all use data and facts and history in order to pull that off, okay? So yeah, it's interesting, this concept of universal. They're still saying universal suffrage, so they're still saying that people do have a say, but maybe not as much depending on their education, but not on arbitrary things like their sexes, but on things that matter. So and again, if people have the most amount of have the greatest amount of good for the most amount of people. And if you have this loving idea, then you're not saying, all right, well, those people that only earn 1 vote, well, they're animals and we're going to enslave them or something, or imprison them or something like that. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. If you isolate, and they even say this in a different part of the book, if you isolate only one aspect of truth into a fact and you segregate it from the rest, that's just an isolated fact. It's a dead fact in time. You have to take everything into consideration. So that's why you would say, geez, well, if I'm saying that everybody should have this, not only the people that are educated, but everybody gets to have, freedom of mind, freedom of the person, and that sort of thing, then you're not saying, oh, well, I'm afraid of universal suffrage because now those people that have 2 votes are going to marginalize the people that only have 1 vote. No, in fact, they're so wise that they're going to be able to invent a system that works better for them. A system that says, all right, well, you're the uneducated, and maybe you weren't able to get a job that gave you benefits. So we're going to do universal health care at all because we're going to take care of everybody. So anyways, that's a little bit about how this book not only talks about the deep aspects of the universe, but these are mundane kind of thing, all right? There's no mention of spirituality in this. And to say, the only mentions is to say it's evolutionary, it's not God-given. So anyways, like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. Checking out the Development of the State.